Well, it looks like it's start time. So we'll kick this thing off. Welcome back to day 2, everybody, for the Civil Affairs Symposium webinar of 2020. Normally we do this at a location. Obviously this year we're doing it virtually, which is interesting. Fortunately, I do a lot of Boy Scout or scouting volunteer work, and we're almost totally on Zoom nowadays, so I'm kind of a little bit used to the forum here. As you know, panel 3, work group 3 was titled "The Role of the Non-Commissioned Officer in MDO." Yesterday, listening to the opening remarks from Lieutenant General Cooper, I believe, and then the opening remarks from the Chief of the Army Reserves and Brigadier General Cooley, and welcoming into this webinar, and then followed on with the force modernization portion of USAJFKSWCS and the Proponent, and then followed with USAJFKSWCS discussion group in the afternoon. A lot of the baseline documentation was covered, so I adjusted fire a little bit to try to not repeat that stuff in depth from yesterday, but then to realign it to cover our discussion points with the NCO portion of civil affairs within MDO. I thought back a couple months ago when we got this assignment to how did we do things in my days when coming up, joining the active duty, and then as a reconnaissance scout on active duty, going through basic training and AIT and whatnot. And it was very definitive. And I remember that the air, land, sea battle doctrine strategy was everything in the military during the Reagan era in the early 80s. There was no question about what it meant. Everything we did from day 1 to the day I left active duty to go to college was all about the air, land, sea battle strategy. So everything we did training-wise, all focus on that. And I got thinking about that specific thing and the NCO role in it, of how we trained from the time I was a private to a sergeant to a section sergeant in the CAV, and then following joining college a couple years later when I joined Civil Affairs in '89, how we were still in that mindset even though our prime adversary, the Soviet Union, had started to crumble, and then considering the decade of the 90s where we had to figure out business without that key adversary out there, without the other superpower running around. And so when I thought about all that, I kind of wanted to ground us there a little bit. How that air, land, sea battle strategy drove everything in DOD and everything in the Army, and from the budgets to the strategies to what the roles of the services were, and how those roles have now changed with specifically the things that led up to MDO, Cyber Command, IO, institution of IO, and Futures Command for that matter. So in that, that strategy defined what we did and what the Marine Corps did and the Navy and all the other sister services. So how does MDO redefine us? Some of that discussion went on yesterday. I don't want to repeat that. But I remember through this fall of the Soviet Union and being a CA person at that time, Desert Storm, and then being the first American military team to work with the Russian Army following the fall of the Soviet Union in Bosnia in 1995 and 96. It was interesting to see that some of the things we talk about today were still relevant then. But I remember how much as a corporal and whatnot in the CAF, how we studied how to defeat our enemy, where I would spend time looking at and learning Soviet armor, things that I would have to do, how to take out a tank with a TOW missile, whatever. So that obviously is different with civil affairs, but the concept is still there. So for that time period, when I was working with the Russian Army, I realized, quite frankly, how junky their equipment was for what we thought we were going to oppose on the major land battlefield. And when they gave their second airborne brigade to that mission in Bosnia in 95, 96, and that was their premier unit of the Russian army, and their equipment wasn't there. It was horrible. We would have defeated every bit of it on the battlefield without a doubt. To now, today, where we're discussing the like partners, or not partners, but the like capability of our adversaries. And there's a lot of that gets into the classified realm, which we can't discuss here, obviously, but is it there? Is it not? So from that point of the 90s and all the different things we did then, the small engagements, small wars, low intensity conflicts that we as a Army and the rest of the military engaged in, what role does civil affairs have in that? Well, the people sitting here in this panel right now and everybody else listening knows. We were engaged, and basically civil affairs was engaged in every aspect of everything we've done. I don't think there's been one thing that's happened in all that time, in the last 35, 40 years, that we have not been a part of in one shape or form. So that defines us today. And then when we insert 9/11, I was assigned to SOC year at the time. So being in Europe and one of the prime operational units that engaged in the first acts of GWAT was SOC year and CENTCOM and SOCOM. So going from there to where we are today, almost 2 decades later, you ask questions like, should we have seen it all coming? Probably. The signs were all there. The enemy was there. They were testing us. They were practicing. They were planning, and then they struck. We, as a nation, got caught with our pants down, which brings into the information flow of things. What could we have done if we had a different mindset then to what we do now? And with the information flow, information operations, the full spectrum of what CA brings to the table with our civilian information that we gather inherently on everything we do, every civil engagement, every single project, all the interagency work we do, the NATO, the UN, everything we do is bringing data to the table. So that's a big part of what some of the NCO Corps should have a piece in, as well as every other aspect of civil affairs. So now, after the 2 decades of what we've gone through in the last 17, 18, 19 years, our military has obviously been going through a rearrangement, which is what we're discussing here on this forum today, is our portion of that. MDO brings in the new spectrum of what we're doing. It brings an entirely new defense posture. We now have Homeland Security, which is a new security and protection posture of America. That wasn't here 20 years ago. That is an interagency partner, along with the U.S. Department of State, as well as every other, and we're engaged in those spectrums like we should be. I then thought about what the DoD has done to redesign itself. Like I said, we have Futures Command now, which is kind of leading that charge. We have Cyber Command now, which is a big portion of not just the information, but also of the warfare game in that spectrum. We have Space Command now, which is now becoming prevalent. And then there's more things out there like the IO, which didn't exist 15, 20 years ago, realistically, and now it does. It's a big player in what goes on, how that information gets shared, combined, and put into usable, actionable information. We pay attention to the spread of what goes on in the spectrum of the Army. So we have four panelists here, including in addition to myself. I'll introduce them in a few minutes. Most of you probably already know them or know where they're coming from, but they do represent the various activities of what civil affairs engages in now across both the Army and the Marine Corps and the Navy. So these senior NCOs should be able to cover the spectrum of what civil affairs does and what their specific units are. In a few minutes, I'll introduce them one at a time here. So part of what I thought about when I was addressing the NCO role and MDO is the problem set was, as we saw yesterday, it's all strategic. It's all a future thing coming up in 10, 15, 20 years from now. And quite frankly, after reading through the hundreds and hundreds of pages of different documentation that currently exists in both MDO and the joint side, there really isn't much of anything written about the role of the NCO specifically. So in that way, we have an open book. But then I thought about, well, as NCOs, we don't have an open book. We have very specific things that we do, certainly in the Army, and I'm pretty sure the Marine Corps is largely the same way. So when I think about it that way, I come to things like the NCO creed, right? So in the Army's NCO creed, we look at the third paragraph, and when I started thinking about how do we address what the NCO does for civil affairs and MDO, I went to the third paragraph, which I'll read some of that here, which is competence is my watchword. My two basic responsibilities will always be uppermost in my mind: accomplishment of the mission, the welfare of my soldiers. I will strive to remain tactically and technically proficient. I'm aware of my role as a non-commissioned officer. I will fulfill my responsibilities inherent in that role. All the soldiers under me, and it goes on through that, but it describes exactly what we do. And that is exactly prevalent in what we should talk about here. The NCOs in the Army, and I'm assuming the Marines and Master Gunnery Sergeant Flaherty will get into this when he speaks, is that we recruit. We have to be concerned with recruitment and retention of our NCO Corps, and in the reserves, which is an accession MOS, our recruitment from the street, from high school and college. Who are we getting? Are they the right flavor? Are we recruiting off of active duty or recruiting from the other parts of the Army into the civil affairs, which is what the 95th and the 83rd currently do? Are we getting the right people? Are they coming from the right backgrounds? Training, obviously NCOs do the training. We need to do today so that 5-10 years training that the civil affairs personnel, both in their job specific training, and then what these CSMs here and senior NCOs here, how they train their units to get to the level of intensity and focus that we had when I was a young soldier with the air, land, sea battle training doctrine. Commissioning, that may not be our role, but that's something we need to be concerned with. Exercising, Brian Kaiser may or may not be online, I'm not sure. He's in our force mod shop, and he's been heavily engaged in getting us into the exercising portion of the Army and the joint world. And that was some of that was covered by Colonel Liddick and his force mod folks yesterday. So we're engaging that with the proponent. And additionally, the proponents recently, as most everybody should know, we've gone through a very deep dive into the future of civil affairs, down to everything the capability does, what it needs to do in the future. And we're in the process of finishing up that force management assessment, getting it published and codified with the right signatures at the DA and DOD levels, and then turning that data into actionable doctrine that's going to reform our units, reform our personnel, most likely, and then working on unit training, which then eventually will drive into how we train our soldiers to be enlisted soldiers, NCOs, and then officers also. So given those things, I would like to go ahead and introduce the team we had, the panel we have here. CSM Low is from the 350th KCOM. Welcome. CSM Grow is from the 83rd Civil Affairs Battalion, which supports, assigned to the Force Com, supporting 18th Corps and the 82nd Airborne Division. It's specifically to the rapid reaction of those elements and their mission. but also he'll get into, I believe, where they have a much bigger role with his very heavy engagement across the theater spectrum, and that this is one unit that is exceedingly busy. Then we have Sergeant Major Garric, currently Garric Banfield, currently the Proponent Sergeant Major of the Civil Affairs Proponency. He just recently, within 3 months, I believe, left the 95th as its Command Sergeant Major. He will get into the 95th roles of what it's done, where it's going, and and with proponent issues that he feels usable for the discussion today. Then lastly, we have Master Gunnery Sergeant Flaherty. His boss talked yesterday, the 3rd CAG commander, and Master Sergeant Flaherty will cover some of the Marine Corps NCO issues. So at this point in time, I'd like to start out with CSM Low. If you would go ahead, introduce yourself, give us some points of view on use of KPOC, and then I'll start reviewing some of the questions that we're receiving already this morning. Thank you.
Hi, morning, everyone. I just want to thank you, Sergeant Ammerman. I'm sorry, General Ammerman, Mr. Kohring, and the association, and other VIPs and all the participants that's out there. Just a little bit about myself. I started out in the medical field as a medic and then OR tech, operating room technician. Joined civil affairs after 9/11, and then 2 deployments, one in Afghanistan and one in Iraq. Started off with the 350th KCOM HHC, and then deployed with the 321st CA Brigade, and then the 492nd CA Battalion. Served in the 445th CA Battalion. Did some bonding assignments with Training Battalion and Mobilization Support Battalion, and I was able to serve as the CSM for the 304th CA Brigade. With the mentorship of CSM Benedict and General Cooley and General Ferris, I was able to grow and given some opportunity to my current position now. Given the opportunity by my current boss, General Black, to serve in the 350th KCOM. I've been in the position now for about 8 months now. So I think my question was, has the kind of like the KPOC's effort in addressing the global efforts in support of FORSCOM and the Army Service Component Command and GCC, the Geographic Command. So I'm no means of being a KPOC spokesperson, but I could see, from what I see in my foxhole, just like General Coggin mentioned yesterday, the 353 KCOM did some, or they were about to do a theater informational command out at the Joint Warfighter, and from the info paper, I know they were, TIC was an experimental formation within the 2028 multi-domain operational force. So what we're doing as far as the 350th KCOM, we're heavy in CENTCOM, CENTCOM's AO, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador. Our major support to like JTF Bravo planning team, and as I think I forgot, I think it was General Hopper that mentioned yesterday, we are actually shortly sending officers to assist in the embassy in our AO. That was brought up by the General yesterday. Mainly, I think for MDO, as NCOs, we're here to support a commander, right? So we're not really doing anything different, but it's a different way of thinking about everything. So it's a joint fight. So basically, we have sensors out there, or trying to get more sensors out there to get the ability to say where the enemy or the threat's at, and what's the best way to attack that, whatever system it might be, like cyber or anything. And within those phases, competition, the fight, the returning back to competition, we're pretty much doing as CA, we're doing everything that we're doing right now. We're just looking at it differently. As we better educate our NCOs and officers, and it's more than just a kinetic fight that's going to happen. It's more of So anyway, I'll stop there for any questions or anything.
So, Matt, CSM Low, what are some of the higher education venues that your enlisted soldiers and NCOs are taking, and what do you think might be some of the things we should be encouraging our soldiers to go to college to take, and given our role in MDO and where we should be concentrating on in the future?
I mean, civilian education for one. As CA, you know, our strength is actually, you know, being out. Like most of the CA forces are reserve, and most of the reserve forces, the strength is being out there in the civilian population, whether you be law enforcement or you know, business owner or anything like that. So you could bring that into the fight as we either rebuild when we do reconstruction or anything that has to do with the pillars, you know, the CA pillars. So as far as education, just continue. I of course, you know, the PME that we're doing now, you know, make sure we go to school for the PME, get it registered, if you need to go, make sure you go and take care of your education. Of course, on continuing education outside on the civilian side, you know, get your bachelor if you don't have your bachelor ready, and then go for your master's if that's available.
Thanks. I don't see any questions popping up yet. CSM Grow, would you like to go ahead?
Yep. First off, thank you for inviting me to the panel. I think it's important as a regiment that we discuss the role of the non-commissioned officer as we continually advance our capabilities, especially in the role of civil affairs and multi-domain operations. So it's important. But Tim, thank you very much. CA Association, thanks for having me. So it's important we have these discussions, and they should be uncomfortable at sometimes. That's the only way we're going to advance where the regiment goes. So I'll start off first. Tim introduced the 83rd. We are busy. We're the only force assigned active duty civil affairs, responsible for global force response. Plus, we still maintain a relationship with ASCCs, GCCs, and TSOCs to fill some gaps and seams with the unit of action, which is a civil affairs team. So as we talk the role of the non-commissioned officer, we need to talk about the team sergeant. So that is the point where we talk about the responsibilities of a CA team sergeant to a team and that unit of action. All right. So when we talk about that, that team sergeant is the team master trainer. So we talk about CE, all right, civil engagement. We talk about CR, professionalizing civil reconnaissance, and we talk about network analysis, right, or human network analysis. And we talk about those responsibilities, what the responsibility of a team sergeant is for that. And then we go into the force protection and security responsibility. So as we look at that and we start to understand the roles and responsibilities of the non-commissioned officer to that team in the phases of multi-domain operations, we hit on every aspect of that, especially professionalizing our responsibility to expand the competitive space, all right, through our ability through civil reconnaissance and network analysis. All right, so the joint force, when they look at us, we have to be viewed as a partner of choice. All right, and then when we start talking civil reconnaissance, civil engagement, and network analysis, it's low risk, high return. So absolutely, multi-domain operations are the phases so that we don't have to go to large-scale combat operations. So if we're doing to correct things in the multi-domain operation through penetrate, disengage, exploit, and then transition back to competition. That's all the phases to keep us from going to large-scale combat operations. That's what we want to be able to do. So first of all, CA must continue to establish its place inside the Joint Force as being the premier Army force when it comes to civil reconnaissance. A shout out to the Proponent for working really hard to professionalize the active duty civil affairs with the civil reconnaissance and education through civil reconnaissance, and also the GSE program as we move towards governance. I think education towards governance is critical where we're at right now to be that premier force on the ground, to establish ourselves as the premier force to go to when it comes to civil reconnaissance, civil engagement, and network analysis. I'll stop there because I could talk forever about this. I'm very passionate about the direction that our regiment's going in when it comes to this. So I'll go ahead and pause there, and I can even push it over to Sergeant Major Banfield, which has worked tirelessly since he got the Proponent to professionalize our education platforms for our non-commissioned officers, and then actually solidify that through 600-25. So I'll go ahead and stop there for a moment.
Thank you, CSM. Part of what CSM Grow had talked about is a lot of the efforts going on both within the Proponent, the 95th. We're in the build phase of a lot of the results of the FMA from the last almost 2 years now that it's been getting worked on hard by the Force Mod folks. So this is that deep dive of the civil affairs capability, and hopefully we'll come out with a restructuring and re-emphasis of what we do as a capability within the spectrum of the rest of the Army and DoD. So we are in a multi-phased, rapid production of things like the new 3-57 Civil Affairs Field Manual, Civil Affairs Operations. In conjunction with that, we're actually deep diving into the writing of collective tasks, which will then become the medals for the all the units across civil affairs. These things will be certainly on the plate for everybody within the next year, for units to start refocusing their training efforts with the guidance from the newly published FM when it comes out, as well as that of the rest of the FMA information. I am not sure how much of this has restructuring of unit. That getting looked at, but in the end, it's still NCO's training. Then we eventually that'll work into the new courses for the reclass course and the AIT classes, as well as the officer schools. I'd like to move it on to from here to Master Gunnery Sergeant Flaherty, if you would, please.
Morning. Thank you, Tim. Civil Affairs Association, thank you as well. So civil affairs, to me, when we started out, it wasn't a primary MOS. So officers enlisted, it was a secondary MOS for all of us. And that creates its own inherent challenges because to have any sort of MOS credibility, you need to go back to it. So you can stay, at the time you could stay in the MOS for only so long before, you know, you had to go back to artillery, logistics, whatever you were primarily. I joined Civil Affairs 10 years ago, and in about 2013, it became primary MOS for the enlisted. The primary responsibility that I find Civil Affairs Marines have, at least on the enlisted side, is that we are the continuity of operations. Our officers still need to rotate out once every 3 years. So they have a good education, they get trained, and can have some decent experiences within those 3 years, but then they need to move on to the primary MOS. After that, they can come back, but within that time, we're getting new officers. And it's our responsibility to make sure that that continues. Civil affairs has been a unique world, I think, for me, and from what I can tell through conversations with other Marines, with a lot of Marines. It's a new and different world for us. One of our main force multipliers are the Marines themselves. Because we're primarily reservists, as Colonel Cunningham mentioned yesterday, there's a slew of experiences, and a lot of the people that show up are absolutely impressive individuals. I've had politicians, I've had lawyers, educators, I've had a lot of law enforcement as Marines that are part of my team or group. That's where I find a lot of the value comes in that they bring. They're often a lot more educated.
You got muted.
Because there's a lot of deployment opportunities, thank you. There's also going to be a lot of experience that comes with it. So what exactly does Marine Corps Civil Affairs do? We focus a lot, and when we're refocusing now, a lot on littoral operations. So ship to shore, shoreline, and maritime operations. Where does civil affairs fall into this? So essentially, we're going to be looking at a lot of SPODs. I'll get into that as we go into the multi-domain operations. So as we're looking at SPODs, we also going to need to look at how to interact with local nationals. We're going to have to conduct surveys and make sure that the SPODs are going to be worthy of that they'll be able to support everything that we need to bring ashore. For air, it's going to be APOD surveys, Salacia payments, ISR requests for any humanitarian operations that we need to conduct. Space, so I've had direct interaction with space, and they've been a huge help. I was on a joint team, and we were conducting humanitarian operations through Iraq at the time, and I was working with USAID and by extension the ICRC. We had a humanitarian team moving throughout the AO. We would get warned when they got close to the forward line of troops, or if they were traveling along a path that space would discover had mines or IEDs that had been placed. So we could gently advise them to correct their course. A combination of using space, we also use air, like I mentioned, ISR. We can either research an area prior to using it, or we can follow a humanitarian operation as it goes live. For cyber, cyber is interesting. I've had some experiences with Army PSYOPs and some of the messaging that they put out. We bounce a lot of ideas off each other and have in the past, and I like working with them a lot. There's a pretty good capability that they have. And then going back to the sea, we try to lessen the impact that the military is going to have on the local populace, but also try to be a force multiplier for the commander operating in that AO. We interact with USAID and are the primary coordinators for USAID actions for the commander. CSM Grow mentioned, you know, multi-domain operation problems, and I love how I started nerding out on that. That was amazing. Starting with compete, you know, how do we defeat an enemy's enemy? Sorry. One of the things that we would do is put ourselves in place. Colonel Cunningham also mentioned the advanced, expeditionary advanced base operations. It's the new way the Marine Corps is operating. Instead of having hard and fast lines where we show up and we create some massive foreign base like Camp Leatherneck, we'll show up, conduct what we need to quietly, and then be about our business. The way civil affairs is folding into that is laying down the groundwork. So we show up, we can take a look at what might be a good site for a missile pad. What would be a good site to keep Marines until they're ready to you know, be launched from shore to whatever the mission is, and interact with the local populace to help keep things quiet, and then also gain support from them. And that goes into penetrate. How do we get into denying the enemy access to a region, an area, or to deny their activities? If we're in the area and we get that local populace support, this is how we do that. By extension, we start moving into the deeper areas, and if we're there early, we can start engaging deep enough where we're going to stop enemy activity a lot sooner. And if we're there first, you know, we're going to be the main competitor. Hopefully, by our presence, we will allow a freedom of movement that for local populace or for whoever is the investiture. And that's essentially how we are looking at multi-domain operations. Now, it's challenging for one service to do it alone. Right now, Marines and Army are the civil affairs operators in the DoD. Navy I've worked with the Navy before. They got rid of their civil affairs, but they were very good at what they did as well, and they focused a lot more on the SPODs. So we're picking up more of that role, but one of the most successful ways that I've seen civil affairs conducted is jointly. So because we have, you know, 5 domains of the operation, it's difficult to have one force do it all. So we should be seeking out more joint opportunities to interact and to operate, to perform more successful engagements. Tim, with that, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, before I go to Sergeant Major Banfield, we had Jacob Showerman asking CSM Low in the 350th KCOM. He asks, do you see a utilization of the command language program? And if so, of these soldiers who go to the DLI or are heritage speakers, are they being utilized in the operational sense?
Hi, thank you for the question. I do see utilization of the command language program. I know we promote that in our command and try to revitalize that. Sometimes and you as well know, it takes a little while for someone to get selected and then go to school and then come back to us. As far as I'm not sure about the numbers as far as heritage speakers at this time, but I could probably get that and get back to you on that. Did that kind of answer the question?
We'll have to wait for a response from
Okay, back to you, Tim.
Jacob. Master Guns, John Phillips asked a question. Hitting a structural challenge for the Marine CA enlisted are responsible for continuity and expertise in the field. I find that doesn't translate into how the CA field does long-term planning for its CA forces. How should we as NCOs and senior NCOs influence long-term trajectory of Marine CA?
Having a good relationship with the command is the start. We need to have the commander's vision solidly in place, support it, and figure out ways that we can propel it forward and enhance it. So what we often see is, like I said, officers will need to go back to their MOS, but they do often return to civil affairs. So while we enlisted maintain continuity that have the primary MOS, and we maintain continuity while the officers need to go return, there are new officers that are coming in and when the previous officers return, normally it's in some form of command. So they're generally going to have knowledge of civil affairs when they return and are in command, have a good vision of what they want to see the unit and the force do. And it's up to the enlisted to support that and also provide guidance. We, again, maintain the continuity. It's up to us to provide our ideas from our experience, if that makes sense.
Thanks. We have a few other questions, but I'm going to move it over to Sergeant Major Banfield. I left him for last because he's representing both the 95th as the recent CS, now as the Sergeant Major. Some good discussion for us. Garric?
Hey, appreciate the introduction, Sergeant Major. Hey, Garric Banfield. I'm currently serving as the Civil Affairs Proponent Sergeant Major. Just left the 95th Civil Affairs Brigade as a CSM over there. And we're trying to work on some audio feedback problems right here before I keep. Hey, so as far as I see the role of the NCO in multi-domain operations is much like Sergeant Major Lowe brought up. I believe the role of the non-commissioned officer is going to stay consistent regardless of what the future doctrine looks like. The primary roles of instilling the professional Army ethic amongst the force, taking care of day-to-day operations within the prescribed policies and directives, caring for individual soldiers, and accounting and maintaining arms and equipment have been consistently NCO roles since the inception of the Non-Commissioned Officer Corps back in 1775. Within the past few years, the Army's actually added one more task in AR 600-20 command policy for the non-commissioned officer, and that is fostering initiatives through the NCO support channel that encourage first line and junior leaders to take responsibility for building a team in a climate of respect, and trust. And I think this is a really great move for the Army, because it's getting back to putting the first line leader, the onus of responsibility on that first line leader of taking care of soldiers and getting after the issues that they're seeing within the Army and developing that climate of dignity and respect. So reading through the TRADOC PAM, the MDO in 2028, and anybody that hasn't read it, I encourage you to read it. It really is a good read, the concept paper. But going in there, one thing that stuck out for me most significantly in regards to a non-commissioned officer is actually in the foreword by General Townsend. It says, throughout the United States Army's 243-year history, the grit, ingenuity, and initiative of the American soldier stands at the forefront of nations' success in peace, competition, and armed conflict. So the grit, ingenuity, and initiative, specifically ingenuity and initiative of the non-commissioned officer anywhere in the Army, whether it's in civil affairs or anywhere else across the Department of Defense, really, is what makes the NCO Corps what it is, how we contribute to the fight. A lot of times, as we continue to evolve into different, into MDO and doctrine changes, there's a heavy focus on the education, on broader thinking, and this is important, and the NCO Corps is continuing to evolve with that. But we cannot forget our primary duty. And excuse the bluntness or the crudeness, but from day one in the Army, I was told that the role of the NCO was MSH, and that's make shit happen. And that started out at 3rd ACR. I've got a very similar background to Mr. Kohring and upbringing. And that's the way I was developed as a junior soldier, what I've always seen the role of the NCO. And I don't think that's going to change as we go forward to MDO. It's what the NCO can bring, how they can help out the team, what they can do for their officer, and what they can do for their subordinates is what the role will remain consistent. As far as MDO goes, I don't see it as a big departure from, I'd see it as a return to air-land battle doctrine with some add-ins, with technological add-ins for the 21st century. So I think it's going to bring us back to the basics on some things. I'm getting to the war fighting. It's going to delineating that contact layer with the blunt layer, the competition space with large-scale combat operations. And civil affairs has a role across the entire spectrum. Obviously, in the competition space, civil affairs teams from across all components are engaged in the competition space, trying to see the influence from competitors, and going into the large-scale combat operations is where we're really focusing as a proponent right now as a result of the force modernization assessment that was run last year with participants from across the entire branch, taking the lessons learned there, the gaps in analysis, and working that into collective training to identify really what the roles of those civil affairs organizations by echelon are. As far as those collective tasks will be distilled down into individual tasks, which is going to influence the training pathways for all MOSs and AOCs in the branch. I expect a refinement of what the specific duties and individual critical tasks that are performed by echelon coming out of the FMA. And then education so there's several education initiatives that are going on, and the reserve, on the reserve side, I know a lot of officers in NCO go out to Naval Postgraduate School and attend courses out there on stability, on governance, which I think are great additives to the professionalization of our officer and NCO Corps. on the active side, we're taking a look at the PME program, or the NCO PDS program that we have currently. The ALC and is embedded into the civil affairs qualification course. In the future, I see that coming out of the qualification course and being a standalone course, specifically as we go forward with the 38 X-ray initial entry program. We're going to need to ensure that our NCOs are getting the high quality, and meeting the Army standard for non-commissioned officer professional development courses. And back over to you.
Garric, we have a question from Veronica Oswald in the chat window. It's a little bit of a long read, and I think it probably fits your spectrum.
Okay, which one was that? Was that from Dr. Black?
Veronica Oswald in the chat window rather than the question and answer.
Yeah, hey Doc. You know, first of all, it looks like you've held just about every MOS and AOC within the RSOF community. So I think that's you probably have the best view of that. Yeah. So to me, we do need to be holistic thinkers in SOF and in civil affairs at large. And there is often a time that creative thinkers, nonlinear thinkers may not get the audience or make the connection, be well received the way it's intended. I think it's important for to be ambidextrous. You have to be able to understand systems. You have to be able to understand linear thinking as well as nonlinear thinking and thinking outside the box. And you have to know your audience and who you're talking to, and you have to adjust your messaging to meet your audience. When you're pitching an idea or a concept to somebody that you know is a traditional-minded linear thinker, it's a responsibility to modify that narrative to your audience, is one. Secondly, I think it's important that our NCOs, and I'll speak specifically on the active side where I've worked closely with the civil affairs NCOs, once you enter the civil affairs community, it does not mean you're leaving the Army. We are still part of the Army, and we still have a responsibility to understand Army processes, Army systems, Army regulations, and the way the Army does business. And oftentimes that's not addressed and not articulated well within our non-commissioned officers. As a senior non-commissioned officers within this branch, we have a responsibility of driving that point home and ensuring that our junior NCOs are learning those Army processes and systems. Over.
Thanks. For the panelists, please read the question that's in the question answer block prior to answering so that everybody knows what the question was. What had asked, Dr. Black had asked that CSM or Sergeant Major Banfield just responded to us. How do we train, communicate, and make visible the ways in which CA, SIOP, unconventional SOF, service personnel think about the world differently, systems, connections, nonlinear, etc. And that's what Sergeant Major Banfield just answered. We have a question from Cecil Culfberth. I'll ask for any of the panelists. What is the relation, it's probably going to be more CSM low. What is the relationship role interface between an NCO Corps and the 38 Gulf officers, specifically the subject matter areas of different skill identifiers?
Thank you for that question. I'll try and answer that one. Well, I mean, the 38 Gulf are basically subject matter experts in their field of civilian field. And that's why we bring them in for this for the expertise of what they have to offer, just like what they kind of covered that yesterday. So as far as we're here to support the officer. So if they need more help with being the soldier side, or if we could support them in any way as far as their subject, you know, or the expertise, that's what we're here for. So I don't know if that kind of answers your question, but it's
Thanks. Veronica Oswald, Hiratake. Sorry if I slaughtered your name a little bit. She asked a question in the chat window, which I think everybody can see, but she asking if we could speak on the structure of civil affairs in each service related to the cultural support teams, female engagement teams, or lioness teams. This gets to the new women's peace and security strategy and DoD WPS strategy framework implementation plan that addresses applying gender perspective and the meaningful participation of women modeling within our force, and then working with partners both in their own force development and then in keeping women and girls safe, secure, and promoting their participation, participation to lead to prosperity within the community. She's with the WPS strategy and DoD WPS strategy implementation plan. I don't know which of the panelists would maybe want to approach that question. It's a fairly long question in the chat window.
Man, so I can address some of that. So we did have a Lioness program. This was a pilot program that invited females to engage with the infantry, and then that went away, and now combat arms are open to both genders. So female engagement teams used to be a thing, but now Civil Affairs has made the female engagement MOS. So for the Marines, it's actually part of Civil Affairs now. There were some obvious considerations in Afghanistan and Iraq where there are cultural sensitivities applied to gender. I think moving forward, this will still be important with different cultures where that's going to mean something. I think it's going to be incredibly helpful to day-to-day operations when we're forward and women think of things that gentlemen don't sometimes, as far as not to be concerned or any other concerns while we're conducting humanitarian operations that might not immediately be thought of. Over.
Okay. We had two questions, one to CSM Banfield, and then and the other was regarding one from Jacob Showerman, regarding NPS and other institutions to directly affect and support the military. And they asked specifically to CS Banfield, you spoke about the NPS and the SSDCO programs. Are you aware of that is still an ongoing program and for the RCCA leaders to attend, or has it been disbanded?
Hey, sir, to my knowledge, it is still it still exists out at NPS as the SSDCO, and that's Ms. Gutierrez that runs that. I will inquire today out at NPS to verify that, and I'll put that out through the personnel section of the Proponent once I verify that. I don't know of any active duty officers or NCOs that have gone through the program, but I do know that a significant number of our reserve soldiers have gone through it, and I think it's a great program. Typically, when the active duty go out to NPS, they are out there for a specific program. Once that's complete, then they're returning to the operational force.
Okay. We have Mike, Major Mike Carlson asking, he's from the 83rd, asking for the panel. Can anyone speak more specifically to the role of the CA team sergeant regarding officer mentorship and development, the MDO environment, and ultimately the LSCO fight is assessed to be faster paced and more dynamic than what we've seen before. Consequences of inaction and leadership miscalculations will be higher. How do you see the role, scope of CA team sergeants evolving in relationship to training of that officer?
Hey, sir, I can take that one real quick. So absolutely, the professionalizing our team sergeants and making sure that they understand their role on the team, having the strength of faith and confidence from the soldiers and leaders on that team and in the organization. But a team that focuses on being soft professionals, all right, being physically fit, fostering the team of teams mentality, meaning tying back the doctrine and understanding and cross-talk amongst team sergeants, empowering subordinates, mastering the basics, being experts of our craft, meaning understanding CR, CE, and network analysis, and then being prepared for any environment. If they focus on that, the team sergeant focuses on that and focuses the team on that, they'll be prepared to stop any operational issues, which would be unethical acts, inappropriate relationships, alcohol downrange, stop discipline issues inside the team or the organization, sexual harassment, sexual assault, racism, suicide, domestic problems, maintaining the readiness of the team, all right, and educating the team leader on that and holding the team accountable and the organization accountable, balancing the team and family dynamics, supporting the positive culture and identity of what it is to be soft civil affairs, and then avoiding training atrophy. So maintaining readiness and consistently preparing that team for what's next on the horizon.
Thank you. Brigadier General retired Chris Stockwell asked a question of the panel, but he's the former commander of the 351st KCOM. He asked, what are the biggest challenges in the NCO training in order to develop the backbone of the tactical, operational, strategic operations? Please spend a few minutes on each level. For example, an NCO in a CA company, at a CTC, a battle staff NCO and a warfighter, or a TCAPT Sergeant Major.
Hey, Tim, I'll take that. I'll start off with that. I think one of the challenges we have is probably timing. As far as the reserve side, we are constantly looking at the as a reserve, you have 1 weekend a month and a couple of weeks during the year to try and squeeze out all the mandatory training that we have to do for the year, and also your PME and things like that. So when a reserve soldier, whether it be enlisted or junior officer that needs to go to school, but they're also in college courses and or maybe their civilian job, they need to plan ahead and try and squeeze all that things in. So basically, we haven't gotten more days as far as reserve requirements other than the 1 weekend a month or 2 weeks a year. But at the same time, it seems to be a little bit more as far as that we need to do. From everything from PME to continuing education. So I'll start with that, and anybody else want to take over?
One of the things that I've noticed is that enlisted Marines are normally at the tactical level. Once we start getting operational or strategic, I find voices fading away simply because lack of something shiny on the collar. And that's just speaking bluntly. While there may be experience, there may be knowledge, it's not always given the weight that, you know, it should deserve. As far as training, CSMLO is absolutely correct. It's tough to get the amount of training that would be, we do what we can in a weekend. That's simple facts. Beyond that, schooling, we go to our MOS school. We try to get any ancillary schools, like an information operations course as well, but we don't go through the pipeline that I've seen a lot of the 95th go through, which totally jealous of your training schedule. We go to CA school, and that's really what's required of us. Beyond that, there's civil military operations planner course, and that's where we go through our version of the MDMP. But that, I think, the planners course, and we call them staff NCOs, anybody with a rocker, that's when we start getting into the operational level of warfare and strategic. But strategic, it's always going to be supporting an officer, and like I said, even operational, you need somebody who is going to be supported by their officer to ensure that their voice is heard.
Did anyone else have comments on that question?
All right, this is Sergeant Major Banfield. I got the mic working again. All right, I think as a tactical, I can't speak at the KCOM. I think Sergeant Major Lowe has hit it at the KCOM, but I can talk well at the brigade, battalion, and team level. So starting at the team level, that focus needs to be on that tactical training. First, above all, is those teams, the team sergeant and the NCOs and officer on those teams need to know how to function as a tactical element and how they fit into the operational level. Oftentimes I see the teams, I go down and talk to teams, and they're tied in they view themselves as the strategic operational, and that is at the cost of the tactical level training. The tactical level training is a baseline foundation of what we need them to do. And understanding your role at the strategic and the mission 2 levels up, that goes with the territory of being on a CA, of being at any echelon. At the company level is in the 95th, although we do have the advantage of having the ability to train 365, believe it or not, fitting fitting all the requirements into those calendars are challenges. It pales by comparison to what the challenges that our reserve counterparts have to deal with, because they're extremely limited in those days. But prioritizing training at the company level to get after those company and team collective tasks in support of the mission and their medal is a challenge that hits the company leadership and fitting that into the training cycle. At the battalion level is seeing how they work in operationally and how they can integrate their companies into the operational level. And we're getting after that with doing a biannual collective training exercise out in Indiana, which is run by the brigade, and each time there's a battalion level staff that's running civil affairs teams from across the brigade. And then really the role of the brigade is fitting in, is resourcing that training for the battalions, companies, and working as this conduit between the brigade and our higher headquarters of the 1st Special Forces Command. Over.
Thanks. Adam Scarisbrick asked a question. He's from the 97th. I think he's getting out and going to the 422, I think. what his email said, or his statement says, for any panelist, is there more talk about creating an ASI for human network analysis, civil network analysis? Do you see this as a beneficial for professionalizing SIM and HNA sections?
So I'll take that one. Well, first, it's going to be a loss for the 97th, but a heavy gain for the 422nd. So anybody out there in the 422nd, consider yourself lucky getting Sergeant Scarsbrook. He's one of our more intelligent and educated non-commissioned officers, and he's going to be a loss to the active duty force. So to get after the question, the ASI, what are we trying to achieve with the ASI? And I despise a question, what's the problem we're trying to solve? But in this case with ASIs, there's a regulation, Army regulation talks very specifically about what ASIs are utilized for. They're utilized to identify skills that'll be used in a reoccurring, for reoccurring assignments and skills that are acquired for a small population of the force. And if there's a position coded, if there's continuous positions coded where there's a formalized training that awards the ASI, I think there's some value in it. Oftentimes, the problem I have with ASIs is they almost become merit badges, and folks are chasing ASIs just to have the ASIs, not to gather the professional development and the education that's associated with those ASIs. If we have a formal utilization process for those ASIs, I think it's well worth looking at. However, in the HNA and the civil knowledge integration side, we're still trying to figure out what right looks like before we formalize any program. Over.
Well, I don't see any more questions coming up, but some of this brings up those questions like I asked originally is what kind of higher education should the NCO Corps be looking at by going to college on their own time? Should we get more into statistics and information related or cyber or IT level majors in college or minors in college while they're going to school? Fortunately, unlike when I was a private and a corporal and whatnot in the active duty, our NCO Corps is much more educated now, with the majority of senior NCOs having degrees and advanced degrees, and most soldiers have been attending college that I see, certainly within our force structure that I've seen. And obviously CSM Lowe can attest to how many of his soldiers are in the military while attending college full-time and being a reserve soldier. Can anybody want to comment on where they think or believe that our soldiers should be pushing their private education into, and what zones and areas of concentration for skill set within civil affairs?
Yeah, Tim, I'll take the first swing at that. So I believe any education that somebody's going to gather is going to make them a better thinker, broaden their perspective in life, and professionally and personally. Ideally, as civil affairs professionals, if we're doing courseware in governance and economics and things that are directly applicable to our ability to do a job, I think those are the best courses. Those would be the ideal course of action. However, guys that are focusing on IT degrees, on defense degrees, on any specific degree is a benefit to them and to the organization. We're working through the leadership development side of Proponent. We're looking at more accreditation of our civil affairs training. So getting that civilian accreditation. And that doesn't mean we're trying to bring the bar of civilian accreditation down to meet our training. We're trying to raise the bar of our training up to meet the level of civilian education credentialing. There are civilian education opportunities within the force right now at NDU, and we just held a panel this last month for Naval Postgraduate School, and there were NCOs allowed to compete for that again. And then also available are through the Joint Special Operations University are the continuing education programs level 1 through 3 that guys can self-enroll in through the JASOFC or JSOW website. And that's Joint Special Operation University, and there's a self-enrollment key to that. And while those are military education, there's civilian credits that they can earn through those. Over.
Yep, and I'll piggyback off that. Colonel Liddick and some of his colleagues in small war journals published Calibrating Civil Affairs Forces, Lethality in Large-Scale Combat Operations, and I'll directly quote one of his comments, is hybrid warfare combines the use of multiple layers of irregular economic, information, social, political, and cyber warfare. So any of those are absolutely tied to our regiment in civil affairs to better educate our non-commissioned officers and officers along those hybrid warfare efficiencies.
One of the things I found is that in their civil affairs community, we have some of the highest educated enlisted Marines, and some of the focuses that I've seen that have the most value and have benefited the service the most are generally political in nature. So poli-sci, but they have a focus in diplomacy and have a decent ability for interaction with people, and their people skills are generally higher. What really has benefited, since I mentioned most are already of a higher education, are the different backgrounds they bring. So like I said, we have law enforcement and politicians, teachers that show up, and some lawyers, and that really has helped a lot. And within each of those professions, they also have their own education structure.
Okay, so I'll kind of bring that up a little bit. Also regarding education, as you can hear from everybody else, like all the different subjects to kind of focus on. Long and short of it, if we're talking to junior enlisted or officers right now, just stay in school. Take something. It doesn't matter what it is. Do something, and if you're not sure what it is that you want to do, start with something, and then that way you could, as you're going through the school, you could focus more on certain subject. But it really behooves you to do that, because there's all this benefits out there that like a continual tuition assistant. You basically go to school or go to college for free after you serve in the military, and you know, while you're working that off, right? So there's all these programs out there, and just be smart about it and stay in school.
Thank you. We've got another question from Captain Kramer at the 432nd. What are some of the best broadening assignments for civil affairs enlisted looking into to position their careers for success?
I can tell you the best broadening assignment for a non-commissioned officer is at the Civil Affairs Proponent office. Shoot me an email and we'll get you on order.
Very good answer. I can tell you from experience going to the Proponent as a mid-grade NCO, as a sergeant, staff sergeant in early in my career, Sergeant Major Banfield's 100% correct. That was probably the best experience at that time in my career to open up the aperture to what the Army is about, how we train, not just pushing training, but how we train and why we train. So he's 100% correct. Assignment to a proponent is and should be a high mark for a military resume and bio.
Yeah, on a serious note, this has been an eye-opening, broadening experience for me. I wish I'd have had this job prior to my last job, or prior to even being a battalion command sergeant major, because I realize now that the proponent has the ability to shape so much for the branch and get after a lot of the problems that I saw as a battalion and brigade command sergeant major. Broadening assignments for the active component right now are limited to broadening assignments within the branch, and you know, the definition of a broadening assignment is it changes depending on who you're talking to. We've expanded I view a broadening assignment for a civil affairs non-commissioned officer as any job you're doing that doesn't require the specific skills of a civil affairs NCO. Anything that's taking you outside of doing civil affairs for more than 51% of your time, to me, is giving you a broadening experience that you're not going to see going from team sergeant to first sergeant to CSM. So anything taking you out of your comfort zone is good. On the AGR side, I know there are designated broadening assignments for 38s that are managed by the HRC team, and there's a lot of 38 Bravos that are filling non-38 Bravo positions across the Army, and I think that's a great thing for the experience of the NCO and for the Army to get civil affairs non-commissioned officers out there across the Army to give our perspective on problems. And I cannot speak to any level on our TPU side. CSM low, can you get after that for the traditional reservist broadening opportunities?
If you're in the CA PSYOP realm right now, I would recommend like doing a OCT. Go out to do a stint at as an OCT at NTC or JRTC. That'll kind of, you get to work and kind of see more of the greater scheme of things and training. As far as TPU, I can only speak for myself because everyone does a little bit different on the career track, but definitely, as you mentioned, anything that gets you out of the comfort zone, which is everything to what I'm doing right now, to volunteering to do maybe outside of CA PSYOP, as CSM running previously USAJFKSWCS CSM running was very I guess the message regarding broadening assignment is don't be afraid to go outside of like USAJFK and then learn from the bigger Army and then come back. You can always come back. So you know, go do a stint at training, like a training battalion or training brigade. Go out to First Army and do some of the training out there, or 75th or anything of that sort, and then see what's out there with the Army's big. So, over.
Yeah, I would concur. I don't think you're going to find AS1 NCO in the 3rd Battalion or any of the task units that will disagree with the fact that they understand a lot more now after serving in those positions as trainers of our force. So that's an absolutely correct statement. We had a Dr. Vendrinsk. Sorry if I messed that name up. She's asking, she's a research sociologist with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. As a sociologist, she says, I am often frustrated by the Army's almost exclusive reliance on fields of psychology, political science, economics, and anthropology. Sociology has a unique and different perspective to offer. Why is the Army afraid of sociology? She would recommend, I'm not sure if she would recommend that we look at the improving U.S. Army Civil Affairs assessment through social power analysis, which was an article, I believe, in the Small Wars journal, maybe, and insurgencies. Does anybody have any comments on that? I'm not sure how to answer that question myself, but
You know, I think the Army as an institution, we lean towards hard sciences, and we get in general as an institution, we get uncomfortable with the softer science side of things, and there is science to sociology, but it is not hard science, which we're naturally comfortable with in the Army. It's measurable, consistent over time, and sociology is on civil affairs side. I don't think that the civil affairs community at large is afraid of sociology. I think we try to embrace it. However, sociology is something that takes a long and a lot of dedication, a lot of time, and a lot of study to achieve. On the active side, unless it's somebody who's done sociology as their course of study in their education, we don't have the time that we can institute sociology across the force by at large. Over.
I think she brings up a great question. Certainly with our MDO and the gradual movement towards civil networks and social networks and all that, more and more we may see this becoming a area of study and inclusion in some of our own training programs as well. So anybody else got comments on that?
Yeah, my daughter just graduated a sociology degree, and absolutely it's creating reach back to subject matter experts as we do the analysis, to reach back and hit up the SMEs to look at that through the perspective, especially when you start looking at transition and return to competition as you move through the MDO process. But yeah, SMEs absolutely for a non-commissioned officer in civil affairs. We got to understand all the domains, but we're not going to be the subject matter experts, but we got to be able to have reach back.
Did you get her to put a uniform on yet?
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
Trying to get her to be the first 38 X-ray.
Absolutely. I've got one more question coming down from Will Daniels. Can anyone speak to the importance of moving from special to conventional units as it relates to becoming a more well-rounded active duty NCO? And does the switch hurt the active duty NCO career path or opportunities for advancement?
So I will take that and I'll work from the bottom up. No, it absolutely does not hurt your promotion potential and career development. In fact, it makes you more competitive for promotion, and it definitely improves your well-roundedness and your ability to bridge the special operation and conventional forces. I'll speak personally. I've been in and out of SOF assignments. I've served both in the 95th and in the 85th prior to closure. And then I later served outside the civil affairs again in an Army assignment at the brigade level. The more cross-pollination that we get amongst our forces, the absolute better our force is going to be. There is no better or less better between the conventional force and special operation forces. They each have unique missions and minor different ways of doing business. And the more well-rounded and the more ambidextrous our non-commissioned officers are, is the better off they're going to be. Over.
CSM Grow, you got any comments on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I view it this way, right? So our education and professional training comes from the soft side of the house, but we integrate in the regular Army. Also, never broaden ourselves out. All right, so it's educate, professionally training, integrate, and then validate what we do outside of our little bubble. And we're going to do that is to broaden out. So, absolutely spot on with Sergeant Major Banfield's comments also. I have served inside and outside. For the last 7 years, I have been out. I was the Command Sergeant Major in the National Capital Region for the Army staff, the Pentagon, and it absolutely made me a better, well-rounded non-commissioned officer, and absolutely leveled the bubble on what civil affairs does. Because absolutely our senior leaders understand what civil affairs is, but they don't. We're a small regiment and organization. Majority of our force is outside the active component. So to be able to have that touch points with senior leaders and absolutely level the bubble, what we do is important.
Master Guns, we got one more question, asking a Marine question. Could you read the question and give us your take?
Sure, and I'll read the question out loud. This is from Sergeant Gattaca from 1st CAG. They're out of Camp Pendleton in California. I jumped in a bit late, gentlemen, so I apologize, but for any panelists, have there been any thought given to potential opportunities for CA Marines to attend formal schools on the Army side within the civil affairs scope? I believe one of the setbacks NCOs have in the Corps is having only 1 or 2 formal schools to attending relating to CA depending on rank. So honestly, the difficulty with that is the length of schooling. Typically we use our ATs and you know, it's 2 weeks of training. Civil affairs school is in the Army is much longer, but I think if you can, you should. So there's no rules that say you can't. It's simply being able to take off of work and applying yourself, get with your operations section and training section and apply. Would any of the rest of you gentlemen have any input on how to get a hold of any Army training available to Marines?
Sergeant Major Banfield. I think, you know, on a space available basis, I think we could look at integrating Marines in to current existing courses. Another option is if they're interested in joining the Army team and transferring to the Army, have them shoot me an email at garric.banfield@socom.mil, and we can get working on that right away.
And if they want to stay on the reserve side, they could come on our end also.
We have about 7 minutes left, and I've got one more question that just popped up. Colonel Hughes, 351st KCOM. I've noticed higher emotional intelligence, otherwise known as emotional quotient, EQ, when it comes to CA NCOs. Person with this type of soft skill tends to gravitate towards civil affairs, so he's recognized the people moving to us. When I see this, I will leverage the girl or the guy and versus someone of higher rank. I also notice that this type of NCO may not be as inclined to climb the ladder. These types are best at and brightest in the branch, but sometimes do not acquire the rank to carry the message. So he's saying it's an interesting dilemma. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? I know that there's NCOs in all the formations with some advanced degrees, and sometimes they just want to sit where they're at and do what they want to do, especially in the reserve component where their advanced degree, maybe it usually is, and their job is their bread and butter. So they do the reserve thing, CA thing for something to get away from the other aspects of life. Anybody got comments?
I'll start off with that one. So right now, the Army and Reserve, I don't think they could kind of do that anymore, because you basically have to either promote or move on, right? So I know in the past, when I was in a training battalion, you know, we did have soldier. I had a soldier that's a banker and you know, make plenty of money, but loves what he does, teaching, you know, as a you know, in the schoolhouse. So you know, that kind of I guess that it makes it hard now, because now you basically, you know, if you extended your years or had X amount of years as your current rank, you either have to go to school. That's no longer an option if you go or not. You basically have to go to the school, and then when the time comes up, you do need to move on or basically move out.
That, of course, yeah, you're right. That, of course, falls in the senior NCO management at the certainly the CSM level and other senior NCOs on the units. So obviously, we're not going to let these people stagnate in place. And like you said, it doesn't happen anymore because the rules and policies and regs have changed to push the issue, push the soldiers on to further achievement. Anybody else? We're running out of time here. We got about 4 minutes left for final comments. Well, I appreciate the panel, the people sitting in on us. We kept about 70 folks listening in. Panel members, thank you for your time and attention to this. I realize NCO role and MDO is a hard thing to approach since there's really nothing currently written, but it certainly gives us our path ahead as to what we need to engage, certainly within the proponent and within the units. And as Sergeant Major Banfield said, get your soldiers to apply for the proponent positions soonest at all levels. That's where I work, and I can tell you it's a pretty good place to work. What you learn there and what you bring back to your units when you return to the fold is uncalculable and immeasurable. So thank you to the panel. If anybody has any final comments, I'll get off of here and then log it out at 10:40.
All right, Tim, I think we got 3 minutes. I'll burn up 30 seconds of it. I want to address a conversation that's going on in the chat about why there's no female panel members today. Bottom line is this: these were sergeant majors that were asked. We have our first, on the active side, we have our first female sergeant major select this year. We've got the portion of the performance of the females within the civil affairs branch, I think, is extremely high, and they're extremely competitive. However, in the first few years of the branch being in existence, it was heavily male population coming over to civil affairs. We've right-sized that. We're getting a good showing of females joining the ranks now, and they are moving up and moving up fast. Some of our most competitive at the E8, E7, and E6 levels are female soldiers. 95th had 2 females graduate Ranger School this past year. They're killing in all areas, daily performance, leadership roles across the board. So the females are proportionally holding their own without a doubt within this branch. And this is that's one of the things I appreciate about the civil affairs branch is the diversity that we have amongst our ranks. It's naturally built in, and it's one of the strengths of this branch. Over.
CSM Low, any final comments?
No, just thank you for the opportunity to serve on the panel and be able to respond, you know, to spend this time with everyone. I want to thank my boss, of course, Brigadier General Black, and my battle buddy, of course, CSM Trotter and General Coggin for this opportunity. And then thank you and the CA Association for all that you do to help us develop our next generation of leaders.
Thank you. CSM Grow.
Nope, just echo everybody's comments. Thank you for their participation in leveling the playing field across the regiment when it comes to non-commissioned officers and professionalizing.
Master Gunnery Sergeant Flaherty.
Attendees, thank you for your questions. I appreciate the thought-provoking questions that created some real good dialogue and conversation amongst the panelists. Panelists, thank you. I appreciate sharing this place of honor with you. Civil Affairs Association, thank you for all that you do and being proponents for this MOS. Like I said, very small within the Marine Corps. So I appreciate everything. Reach out to me. I've left my email in the comments if anyone has any further questions.
We did have one request for the information on education that's available throughout the force structures. So Sergeant Major Banfield and I can work on getting either the career pathing charts posted onto the website and or the other education formats like the JSOW and other things that are available to the AC guys, and if anything that's out there that CSM Low might know about. And the Marine Corps, we can, if you got anything, Master Guns will post that as well. So that ends our session. We're at 19 minutes of, which is the window we were given. So thank you everybody for your time. I'm available on email or within the chat window for a few more minutes. Thanks.